Well, we had wonderful desserts at lunch. But I did bring some treats. When you have that 1 o'clock spot after lunch, you have to come prepared. And so this bag, we'll pass it around, but first choice goes to someone who can tell me some fun facts about Knoxville. Was riding in the taxi cab late last night, learned some fun facts about Knoxville. So when was it first settled and by whom?
1786.
Ooh. All right, by who? Do you know by who? Oh, now, who's? Right. All right. Who said James White over here?
I did.
All right.
Our hotel's right next to his house.
All right. Good. There you go. All right. Next question. Get me to Knoxville from in 2 moves from Harvey Keitel and Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta. 2 moves. So meaning 2 degrees of separation. Kevin Bacon game. No, not but like it. They've all been in films directed by who's born in. There you go. Good. All right. Pass these around. There you go. All right.
Now ask a question about Unwarranted.
Ooh. All right. Right. Onalaska, Wisconsin. One of my former stomping grounds. All right. Well, thank you, FOTO, for having me. This is a fun presentation because I was working on how I use FOTO in our practice, and one of the students, we currently have 2 students from Mayo, and one of the students said, we were talking about FOTO, and they go, but really, what does it mean to you? And I thought that was an important question. So get some perspectives, kind of a fun lecture on what FOTO means to us at Catalyst Sports Medicine, and our story. Some of it you've heard before this morning about implementation. We'll talk about marketing. We'll talk about putting on different hats, private practice hat, meeting with the payer hat, and trying to interpret really what FOTO measures. And so we'll start there. That was my house yesterday morning. Had to shovel 3 inches of snow. So that's in the upper corner. A couple weeks ago, we're out in Bozeman, Montana. Big shout out to the Bozone. We go out there about twice a year. And they happen to be showing at the matinee The Princess Bride. Right. So inconceivable, right? And guess when? I remember going to that show in the movie theater. It didn't seem like that long ago. 1987. Ooh, yeah. All right. So let's talk about our story, our perspectives. Really the 360-degree look at FOTO. Here's my information. Selena has me on Twitter now. I try to be active, Selena. I try to answer. For every 20 posts, I try to post once. This is our clinic, who we are. Did take a big leap in practice. Had been going for about 6 years, and the owner decided to actually take an administrative job at Mayo. And so my business partner, he's not a PT. He was our general manager, retired from a large company of 102 employees. And he's 53, I'm 42, and so that's us. We got started January 1st, 2013. Didn't lose an employee. And you can see pictures. We have about 7,000 square feet now. We have 4,000 about 3,500 and 3,500, but we have turf, athletic trainers, strength and conditioning coaches at the local high school, just to give you some perspective. Just so you know, when I'm talking about our data, we have 5 PTs, counting myself. All together, we do about 4.3 FTEs of work. John is the CEO co-owner. 2 licensed athletic trainers, strength and conditioning coach, a PTA, 2 student aides, billing manager. So you get the idea of our practice. Not huge. About probably 22 employees on the books, but when it all boils down to it, about 14 FTE. Where are we located? Just outside Minneapolis, St. Paul. I was a Viking fan, but come on, have you seen them play the last 3-4 years? I'm now a Packer fan because they accepted me with open arms. So we're about 1 mile across the St. Croix River in Hudson, Wisconsin, about 15 miles from St. Paul, Minnesota. Minnesota right now, Minnesota's always been a little bit ahead of the curve with healthcare reform. And we're seeing that again. So whether it's accountable care organizations, patient-centered medical homes, bundled payment options, employer-sponsored models, private payer, that's happening in our area. Healthcare exchange will probably be one of the premier ones that other states look at in Minnesota. I really truly believe that we need to be the musculoskeletal provider of choice. Next week, we're shutting down the clinic for 3 hours, doing a direct access video, and it's going to the Hudson 12 Cinema. I never thought I'd be advertising at the cinema, but 630,000 people will see that if the same number attend the movies that attended it last year. And it's just a 30-second spot, but we're trying to drive that. We don't want to be the last family farm. So how can we maintain our independence, collaborate with others, and also get the patient in our doors? So again, you're getting my 2 cents. We've got a brand PT. We have 5 clinicians, 6 board certifications. I like to say we have the most board certifications per capita. So we have a great crew of physical therapists, a young group, and but again, everyone's a physical therapist. We flaunt our alphabet soup when we're at conferences like this, but our business cards say DPT or PT. And we have to brand that for the public. Physical therapy is not a commodity. You want patients saying, I came to see my physical therapist. Who was your physical therapist? Not where did you get physical therapy, but who is your physical therapist? We work hard in our community to do that. Another aspect that drives me to use FOTO in our practice is accountability with the clinicians. And one of the things we meet monthly on, we have an hour and a half of clinical development every month with the staff, and it's, can you change practice according to what's out there in the research? And it's hard, and that's a hard question, and Chad Cook asked it in this editorial. He said, if something came out and your favorite go-to therapy technique was just shown not to be that effective, and something else was more effective, would you change? And I think that's a hard question for some. Our goal in our area is to decrease unwarranted practice variations, and FOTO is a tool to help us look at that. It drives me crazy when you see things, that was the New York Times article, I think from a couple years ago, that talked about a variety, unwarranted practice variations in physical therapy. And that's not just us. I mean, you look at John mentioned it briefly earlier, but again, the medical system has that unwarranted variation. So we actually developed in the last 6 months a clinical care policy, and FOTO's a part of this, and I'll certainly get back to that with some questions. But our clinical care policy, we actually have the therapist sign a policy that says that they're going to maximize non-specific effects, treatment effects for each patient, while providing a hierarchy of science-based medical interventions, and that we ask them to apply higher level of interventions and rank their interventions. So they can still do what they want. We're not trying to be paternalistic and saying, you can't do this necessarily, but don't do this in absence of what the evidence says. And that ties into some of the work I do with APTA on the clinical practice guidelines. And we have actually taken a harder stand on some treatments that don't have scientific merit. And and again, FOTO ties into that. I'm trying to give you an idea of the culture that we have at our practice. My 2 favorite research scientists there, Dr. Hart for clinical research, and Einstein in his slippers there. And one of the things we've really that I wanted to share with you is we've had our last 2 clinical development meetings talk about non-specific effects of treatment. And essentially what we're finding, and thanks to the research of Dr. Fritz and Dr. Childs and Mark and others, is sometimes there's not great effects. We'd like to think, gosh, we're making a huge difference. But as we look at the high-level research, level 1 and level 2 studies, we see minimum to moderate effects of our interventions. And yet we're getting patients better. And that's the big question, is how much of that is due to specific treatment effects or non-specific treatment effects? And that's what FOTO measures. Remember, FOTO just measures an episode. You give it to the patient on their first visit, you can give it throughout their course of care, and then you give it to on their last. And it's not really meant to measure specific interventions. Now, you'd have to design a randomized controlled trial. You'd have to do that. Instead, what we're measuring is physical therapy, that black box that has so many variables that we talked about before lunch. And why did the patient get better? Was it specifically because of what you did? Was it because they just got better over time? Or is it these non-specific effects of treatment? And and what we've been talking about in our clinical development meetings is it's a combination of both. And that's the rub, right? How can we balance that? And likely, certain patients, maybe you're going to be more effective with non-specific treatment effects than you are with specific effects. And that's where this new buzzword that I like that's coming out in the literature, and it'll be interesting to see where we go with this, but this developing a therapeutic alliance with your patient. And what does that mean? Well, it's things that most of you do already. But do you sit the patient down and really set some goals, agree on interventions, create a bond between the patient and the therapist? I think that's critical, and that really drives our ability to do non-specific treatment effects. And research is just starting to look at this. This was a recent study in the last month in the PT journal, and it was a different study, but they looked at therapeutic alliance and pulled it out from the data that they had. And it does appear, based on this study, I don't want to get in too in-depth there, but this therapeutic alliance was a predictor, did influence your outcome. And we all know that already, but it is holding up. And it's probably likely just as important as the specific effects we're trying to do with our specific exercises, our specific manual therapies, etc. So based on this, and at our last clinical development meeting on this topic, this is posted in our staff room, and when a patient comes in, the therapist needs to maximize the non-specific effects by doing these things. And this was good for all of us, because we think we do this, but do we really? And this ties into when you give the FOTO survey, which I don't like the word survey. We'll talk about that in a second. But when they take that on the iPad, this factors into that outcome, just your interventions do. And FOTO can be a wonderful tool in educating and enlisting the patient, because they have that data in front of them. And in a few slides, we'll talk about exactly what the FOTO experience, or PI, patient inquiry experience, is with patients at our facility. And this is part of it. I joke around. We have lots of fun in the clinic, and you ever get those guys with work? And let's be sort of stereotypical. John started us off with that, so I can continue. Big burly road construction guy, work comp, back pain. One of our favorite things to do in the clinic is we make them change into shorts. And we've got ugly shorts that are like this, and we have some Viking shorts and Packer shorts, so we can give them a hard time with that. And we say, what are you, a Viking fan or Packer fan? And you walk in with the Viking shorts or vice versa. But my favorite thing to do is we have these really tight size, extra small pink shorts. And you walk in the room with those and just sit them on the table and go ahead and change into those and I'll be back. And it's a nice icebreaker most of the time. So, but the point is Some patients appreciate that, some don't. But humor is important. Assess what the patient understands and listen to your patients. And Jerome Grootman, it's either how doctors think or what doctors think. In his book, 18 seconds is how long the patient's allowed to talk before they're interrupted. We have a therapist. Some complaints on a therapist. Wasn't that she was a poor therapist. It was that she didn't seem to be paying attention to me. The whole issue is trying to get her documentation done. So, she was turning away from the patient, not making eye contact, got to get that info into the computer. And now what she does is she listens, makes eye contact, and then says, that's some good information. Let me type that in. So that's important. And that probably become more and more a problem with technology. So all those things factor into we're trying to create change in the patient. And I'm using FOTO since 2005 in a larger organization. In our current organization, I brought it with me 3 years ago when I joined. And so, why FOTO? And it's sort of preaching to the choir, all you here, because you utilize FOTO or plan on utilizing it. But what should be measured when that patient comes in the door? We used to always measure impairments, right? Range of motion, strength. But is that helpful? It's still helpful. I still do that. When is it helpful? Making treatment decisions, when to progress a protocol, communicating with the referring provider. But does it really help determine function? Not necessarily. Patient has 150 degrees of shoulder range of motion. Is that good or bad?
It's functional.
Right. That's the question. Is it functional? If the patient construction sheetrock is 150 degrees enough? Probably not. If they're 80 and like walking the dog and playing with the grandkids, maybe, might be, unless they're throwing the heat to them or something. So right, that plays a role. Had a patient, gentleman who's 65, complete hamstring avulsion, disco roller skating. So it was important to get back to that. I have video to prove it. We got him back. So we have these impairment measures. They give us some information, but not a lot. FOTO, and the myriad, there's over 100 spine measures. There's lots of shoulder measures. But FOTO is how we measure patient-reported outcomes. That's key, and we're finding out that's driving the data we have to collect. And then clinical performance measures. It's still very important, and we utilize those every day. I'm thinking time stare test, sit to stand, functional reach, tug, 6-minute walk test. If you're working with athletes, it's going to be the hop test, the pro agility test, the vertical jump test. And so we have these clinical performance measures. And likely we should, in each episode of care, measure all three. But those patient-reported outcomes, patients come to us with baggage, right? Right? We all have baggage, but some patients have more baggage than others. This week, let's see, Wednesday, saw a patient for her third visit. We'd have a little bit of contact, but we really hadn't chatted a lot about her personal situation. And so came in, her neck pain much worse, but she was finalizing her divorce and her bird of 22 years had died that morning. So obviously she brought some baggage to the clinic. And are we going to be able to measure that? Is that going to affect care? Absolutely. So this is just a nice slide that reminds you that patients bring different things that we have some control over and sometimes we don't. But that's their functional status. So that's incorporated in that. We have to measure all three. And there's some, ideally, if a patient with low back pain comes into the clinic, you like to figure out quality of life, disability, fear, depression, maybe some patient-specific goals. What's the problem with all that? Time, right? So what's the best tool to look at all that with computerized adaptive testing? Yeah, right. So, but that's one of the strengths of FOTO. That's why we use photos, because we can computerize adaptive testing. Some research from Bombardier, again, to truly look at that patient, to look at their baggage, we've got to look at pain, function, generic health status, work disability, patient satisfaction. And so that's very hard to do without an electronic tool, an electronic database. So ideally, I like, this is the next slide. When I go to the Subaru dealer, they give me this, I just went last Friday, not a week ago, yesterday. And they said, your tires are 8 and this and that. And they go through the red, yellow, green. I thought, man, that's just like FOTO. It's just like FOTO. But we have to give our patients a report card, and FOTO helps us do that. We also have to measure impairment measures and then physical performance measures. And one of the things I'm excited about FOTO is, I talked to some of you at lunch, is that how many times do you have your patient come in and they fill out the intake? And let's say total, if they're a patient with a total knee, because this is where I see it a lot, and there's actually some research on this. And they give themselves a functional status score of 45, 50. And 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, you give them the survey again, and they only change 1 point, or they actually lose 2 points. And that clinicians coming to you with that question, they're saying, why did my patient not change? We have the PSFS turned on, so that's a check system for me. So I asked the clinician, I said, well, did their PSFS change? Did their patient-specific, totally different construct than the LAFS, which is many of the questions in the item bank are LAFS questions. And they say, yeah, we can look at that and discuss why that may have happened or not. But oftentimes there's something called response, which is an area of research for me, that the patient recalibrates, because they just had this surgery, and you're asking them to speculate how they're doing on stairs, how and that. And what do you show them? 3 weeks, you say, yeah, you actually suck at stairs, and you have a hard time doing these things. And so then they re-rate themselves, they've recalibrated. And so my point being is that there's things we need to look at that are interesting, but again, FOTO's a nice tool to help us provide those patient-reported outcomes, as well as look at those other measures. And getting back to that response shift, Paul Stratford has looked at that to say that it's correlated. If they're saying they do better on their patient-reported outcomes, their 6-minute walk test is better. But they tend to overestimate. The other issue that when I talk to payers is in contracting, as Nancy mentioned this morning, they don't get the risk adjustment at first. And I think that's key that they understand that. And so I have these slides. I often do a little bit of a PowerPoint when we meet with them, and so that, you can make the geographic areas. Basically, you want a low area with lots of psychosocial issues, maybe a higher crime rate, and well, Detroit has the highest crime rate. Yeah. So East St. Louis isn't much far behind. So, yeah. So you just give a therapist working in Detroit versus a therapist working somewhere else, they give the oswestry. That's what one of the health plans did to us. They said, we want you to collect oswestries all over Minneapolis, St. Paul region. And we all collected oswestries. We were good because the doctors wouldn't collect it. It was up to the therapist. We're being nice, helping them out. And they couldn't use the data because they realized, thanks to us also complaining, that you can't compare without risk adjustment. Joe, I didn't put your name here. This was actually on the slide before, but Joe mentioned this morning something similar to this. So we need risk adjustment to do that. Otherwise, you're comparing patients that you shouldn't. So you have a patient there that maybe has triple fibromyalgia and rabies, and those are the hard ones. Those are the hospital-based patients. and versus one without any comorbidities. And so how do you need a tool to level the playing field, because my opinion is the payers aren't going to do that. So why FOTO? Well, again, I'm preaching to the choir, but I think it's the best tool for the job in 2013 because of its risk adjustment, not the game risk, and because of its computerized adaptive testing, not the Broadway play. So a perspective, what happens at Catalyst Sports Medicine? There we have a patient this week who did have triple fibromyalgia and rabies. Looked like maybe a UCL tear and an ACL reconstruction, and you can't see the SI belt, but I was having a little bit of fun. And so the iPad, note the Gatorade beverage thing, non-specific treatment effects. Hey, would you like a Gatorade while you wait? Serious, you gotta do a little bit of that. And so filling out the iPad survey, this is Erin. Erin's my director of first impressions. If her day goes bad, my day is really bad. Seriously, it's non-specific treatment effect. How the patients are treated up front. Are they recognized? That's key, not only to patient satisfaction, but I would argue too that what the patient takes away from their episode. And we script. It came up earlier this morning. We have scripting. Now they deviate from it. They don't have to read it word for word. But this is part of your evaluation. Your therapist would like you to complete one extra piece on the iPad. It gives the therapist important information that they'll discuss with you. We don't say survey. You shoot yourself in the foot when the director of first impression says, here's another survey you got to do. And that's what happens. That's what happens. So we have scripting. Now we don't need it because they've been doing it, and it's in our P&P manual. But that's important, and that's key, how it's presented. Part of your evaluation, important information. That's Scott talking with a patient. Actually, it's one of our Mayo students. What do we expect the therapist to do? Check for elevated fear, look at the risk adjustment, review just one or two questions. You don't need to go in depth. You just say, you said you have difficulty with this and that. We have the PSFS, the patient-specific functional scale, turned on. And thank you to the FOTO staff. This year it's been much easier with if you've been using that for a while, you'll know that patients used to get it backwards because you were asking them, pain is 0 to 10, 0 is no pain, 10 is puking pain. And then you suddenly ask them, 0, you're unable to do the activity, 10, you have no difficulty with the activity. And they'd often give you a 9, and you'd say, well, you meant 1, right? Because they reversed it. But actually, FOTO did a nice job. Now, if you haven't seen the new PSFS scale, it looks good and it's working well. We don't have that issue anymore. Remind the patient, they will retake the survey. Thank you for taking the iPad survey. That gives us good information. We're going to ask you to take it again in a little bit. I mean, we don't necessarily set a time, but we do warn them that they're going to be taken again, but thanks. Engage the patient. That's important. Develop that therapeutic alliance. Getting statuses. What process takes care of our intakes? We're good with our intakes. Our EMR is integrated, so when we register a patient in the EMR, it gets registered on PI Web. We can email it. It's just not a non-issue. Intakes are a non-issue. After trial and error, after talking to Al and others, once a week, one of our front desk employees and one of our student aides email us an Excel spreadsheet. And they email us and say, you need to fill it out. It's kept on the server, so we all have secure logins. And so the tab is, each tab on the bottom of the Excel spreadsheet is weeks. So, January 8th, 2013, January 15th, 2000. And on each tab, it lists patients that don't have any further appointments scheduled and whether they've taken a FOTO status or not. And so what we do is then, based on the therapist response, keep active, discharge, email, survey, Then Jordan, he works a couple hours extra on Thursday nights. He's a UW, University of Wisconsin River Falls PT student. So he's willing to do a lot for $8 an hour. And he calls patients, reschedules appointments, and completes the action completed on the Excel sheet. And so we're getting there, but it's taken work. And I would say that by far the hardest thing, in my opinion, with photo data collection is getting these status surveys. And then it's helped us retain patients, because you don't have, suddenly you're not like, this patient's been gone for 3 weeks, what happened? So you need something like that, a check and balance system. Here's our data. This was our last quarterly data. So we get that, we review it at the next staff meeting, talk about it. We have a couple of red squares there. Overall, 6 to 8 visits is our average for all body parts. So it's because we're in Minnesota. I would argue that. For so long we got beaten to decrease your visits. And so we're trying something. So at the last staff meeting, when we had this quarterly, right after this quarterly data, I said, we're only seeing neck patients 6.8 times. The average is 11. I said, why? And a couple of things we found out. Sometimes therapists were just hesitant to schedule twice a week, not because what they should have done is ask the patient, can you come in twice a week and talk about that with the patient. But again, we're co-pays, sometimes the therapist forgot to ask. So we're trying to ask, and if the patient's willing to come in a little bit more often, twice a week, on the front end of things, we're trying that. Will the data reflect that? Don't know. And then shoulder was our other area. And again, our efficiency is good, but we can improve on our effectiveness. And so that's a challenge. We're trying to figure out why. And we have lots of ideas, but we're sharing that data. So that data is very important to me. We do annual reviews. You're docked if you don't collect data, if your statuses are way down, but you're not docked on the results of your data. Instead, we view that as an opportunity for education. So, Dan, you've gone to 4 shoulder courses. Your shoulder outcomes are great, but your cervical spine outcomes are down. We're going to pay for you to go to this course. So that's how we utilize our quarterly reports within the clinic. We also have some awards. Remember, FOTO is more than just a 4-letter F word. We have the FISH Award, so Photo Initiative Site Honoree. You probably get this. And then from the bowels of the Gallatin River in the Big Sky Valley, there's the rock with a trout that I decoupaged on it. And no one likes this. So last time I awarded it to myself. Because heck, if you get that to put on your desk and display for that quarter, and they don't seem to appreciate the value of that stone. But if you fly fish in the Gallatin River in Bozeman, you'll appreciate it.
So when you try to tell a joke, does the patient laugh?
Sometimes. So, perspective 6, meeting with the payer. We look. This is our ad in the back of one of the healthy magazines this month, and I'm wondering. It kind of looks like we're trying to pull something over on you. So, anyway, Health Partners is one of the largest payers and providers in Minneapolis-St. Paul. They just merged with another large group, so I like to call them the Death Star. But, it's trying to negotiate, and where we were was the previous practice owner had started the practice in 2006, gotten his contract, and then not met with Health Partners, the payer, for 4 years, 4.5 years. And I came on in 2010, brought FOTO with me, and said, "Gosh, we got to meet with them. We got to meet with them." We're still getting paid horribly, but we have data now. I said, let's go to them, and so since 2010, we've gotten an $11 raise per visit which is it's substantial because it's 28% of our mix. Beginning January 1st this year, we're going to the model that Craig Johnson, who's here, and Jared Schroeder, who's there as therapy partners. We have the model and that's what I used to work for. The model that was piloted with them and has been a success. And so we're on that model where there's a 10%, there's a 5% withhold or a 5% gain. And so let's just throw out a number there of $80. And so you have 10% of that would be $8. And so you have $4 to go either way. And we share our photo data with them. And then what they do is I'm sitting down with them next week to look at last year's data and base the projections for this year. And if we're in the green or the regular, we don't get docked. If we're in the less area, we do. And they want us to succeed too. They are collaborative to some extent and don't want us to fail either. FOTO has worked with them, and we've made good gains with this pair. And so we're going to look at the value adjusted risk scale that FOTO does. So again, we're actually getting reimbursed based on our FOTO scores, not 5% each way. And I wanted to talk here. Here's the frustrating aspect. Shared our data with them. We finally had a year's worth of FOTO data at our new facility, or at this practice. The contracting group looked at our data, loved it, said, you guys have some of the best data we've seen. And they've looked at, and it's just as good or better than other groups. And we shared that with them. And unfortunately, I know what the other groups get paid because I used to work for them. And my mom has had physical therapy in the last year, and I have her EOB. I mean, I know what they get paid. And so I looked at him and I said, so you're telling me, and this is important. I said, I bring you data, and you're telling me that my scores are great, but yet there's a large gap here. Why can't you pay me more? And well, we can only go up, 3% a year and everything. And so it was important because I have satisfaction. I didn't bring anecdotes. I brought data. And now, whether they like it or not, we're bringing data to the table. And there's opportunities to collaborate with the other managed service organization. There's a group of Craig's Johnson here with Therapy Partners. We may look at collaborating with them to increase our pay rate, but we need data to do that. And so FOTO is the tool that's helping us meet with these payers and improve our contracts, as Nancy talked about this morning. The future, all of us in this room are collecting data with FOTO, so we're part of the FOTO family. You bring tremendous value to questions. With social media, I think we need to be a community online to continue to FOTO responds to our feedback and so the future, I think, is bright. I think it's scary as a private practice owner, but FOTO is a big part of helping ensure that I'm doing everything I can for accountability, measurement, and good practice. So, any questions? Yes?
I still am curious. When you've gone into those conversations, negotiating payment, are they willing to share their data if they look at what's happening as you're treating these patients and okay, you got this episodic cost, but if those patients are costing them more money like other patients, are they willing to even give you more money because of the same percentage of that savings that they're getting from people seeing treatment?
Selena's question was, will they share data with you to look at recidivism and saving the money downstream? And Craig, my answer is what have they? You're in the pilot program with me. They've sort of said, my understanding is, we'd like to. We're looking at this.
Yeah, they are open.
Yeah.
Open to that. That's a long distance away from our data.
Right.
So that is definitely our next step.
Right.
Organization.
Right. Right.
So there's a lot more negotiating to go
Right.
on. There's more savings you have to demonstrate to them than just reporting your data. And so it's a pretty robust solution for them to really bite on sharing downstream savings. If you look at what our rehab dollars are in the Medicare program, you don't have to be that. You don't have to look at the TV. You can do it with a small dollar. So you have to place other solutions in your data and at least measuring yourself and sitting down and sharing that data is a great starting point. But you've got a ways to go to really
Right.
get them to buy in and show FMCD costs
Right.
and reward them.
Thank you, Craig. Exactly. I mean, they've done a great, this group is progressive. They've done a great job of decreasing unwarranted spine surgery, and they try to have, patients have to see a physiatrist or go through the X program. But they're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars to PT dollars. And again, I think it comes down to we're savings, but we're not to the degree of savings they're looking at organization-wide. Yes?
When you go to the payers, are you bringing your actual reports? I've heard some people say, bring your reports, change your reports, don't give them that data, don't hand it to them. Explain to them, what, I guess I want to feel for when you do meet with them, how much exact. For copies of it, give that to them, is that proprietary, or how does
Julie, go ahead.
comfort level with that?
Julie from Matheson asked, when you go to meet with a payer, do you bring your actual data, or do you bring a mock-up of this is the data we're collecting? And personally, I have no problems with them seeing my data, but I guess I would pose that to the audience. Does anyone have anything to add to that, or Al?
Well, we try to develop that scorecard to make a concise view or snapshot of how your practice is doing in general. But there are people here who modify that, and then we pull out only the green lights and not the red ones. But no, that's up to them.
But it looks like it would have more credibility if it
Right? Yes.
I was going to ask something, but just to that point, I haven't had anybody say to me, oh, I want to see the original. If they understand it, and you have a relationship with them there, they don't think that you're but the thing I was going to say about that slide you had with the 3x3 square,
Mm-hmm.
the less, okay? When we negotiating, sort of the elephant in the room or the obvious question comes out, well, if we're going to pay the people who do really well more, shouldn't we be paying the people who don't do so well less? And my response to that is, well, you want to contract with, our providers exclusively, so that everyone is being measured in the same program, then we consider it. But you have lots and lots of providers who are not subjecting themselves to this measurement, and so you should not be penalizing the folks that are using FOTO because they're agreeing to be measured. So no, we're not going to take less for that group. And the only way I would do this on an individual basis is if the less was, what everybody else was getting, and then you worked up from there,
right.
not to agree to take below that if no one else is being measured.
Correct. And to summarize, first question is data. I think you determine who the stakeholders are involved, how much you want to share with each stakeholder, and how you share that. Those are really good questions. And do your John and I are big into, one of the things is he brings much more business sense to the practice than I do, and sometimes he just bangs his head against the wall because he goes, healthcare does what? But we do pre-call plans before our meetings lately, and so that would be things I'd put down in your pre-call plan or your pre-contact plan, and go through those. And what do you want to walk away with? What's the minimum you want to walk away from that conversation with? And then the other question was regarding the less squares. And then FOTO's risk adjustment, you can see it's a little different. I should have put up the other square, but the expected is that diagonal 3 there on the 3x3 grid. And this is on the PI webpage. I think it's the 3rd tab. You can get to this. And yes, and that's why we sort of have this pseudo pay for performance. It's really not pay for performance with health partners in the sense that we have this 5% withhold or 10% withhold. And it's, yes, we are at risk, but we're not putting ourselves grossly at risk. And when pushed hard, they want us to succeed because it's a good model that they would like to expand. So, but certainly we are taking a risk versus a set fee. Yes, Gary.
Just to also add some perspective to the payer data, I think you should keep in mind too that to do this right, you have to link individual patient data from FOTO and the clinics to the payer data, and that involves protected health information, and so that brings a lot of HIPAA concerns, and it can be done. My personal goal is to make it happen over the next year or two. But there certainly are challenges, and we do have to be, cognizant and aware that this is patient data that needs to be kept, confidential and keep it that way.
Raise your hand if you have actually scripting. Do you script what your front desk does? So yeah, few. So I think that's critical. Yes. Yeah, sure. So so the question was, how do we get our statuses? To reword is how do we try to increase the accuracy and the collection, I guess would be the better word, collection of our status questionnaire. That second bit of photo information you need. So the easiest, the end result is there on our appointment note screen. So you'll see my list of patients, and there's room on the screen. It'll say, give photo survey. Now a lot of background goes into that, and that's what I shared with you. Once a week, each therapist gets mailed a list of essentially inactive patients. So patients that do not have follow-up appointments scheduled. They have to determine and then it also lists their photo status. It says, there's a column that says intake, there's a column that says status, and then there's a column that says future appointments. And so it's either yes, no, or you get the idea. And so then my job is to take that list, and usually it's 15 names, maybe 20 names, and then I put a phrase in, action to be completed, and it's keep active, call to reschedule, I'll call, get photo at next visit, and many times if they're discharged, it's discharge, email photo, and send thank you card. And again, we try to keep up on that so there's not a delay. Therapists are mandated, they need to get that back to Kasha and Jordan, so to our front office staff in 2 days. And I can send you the Excel sheet. I'll just take the names off. So, if you want to email me. So. Yes, Julie.
You have part of the efficiency and effectiveness and patient satisfaction. Do you use that as part of your therapist annual review?
Yes.
What do you give me an idea of how I can?
Oh, question. So, question was, do I utilize the scorecard with the therapist on their individual review? Be it in mind that I've only been the boss for 4 months, so I've only done 1 review. So that's the disclaimer. But the answer is yes. And what I pushed for as clinic director when I was part of that, and we were just getting to it last quarter of 2012, is that you go over the data, but you don't. Right now, we're not penalizing clinicians for their photo scores. We're penalizing them, if anything, for their status collection. So we feel that there's a nominal level of status data collection should be meeting, and again, not exactly sure where you make that cut point. but they have to collect data. Say if above 70% of the time, that would be a plus in their pro column. Below 50%, 60% of the time, that would be a negative. So standard, would like to be around 70 or something. Those are your decisions. And then continuing education decisions are based on their FOTO score, in the sense that if they're very good at something and they continually want to, because they like treating that condition and they want to keep going to courses on that condition, I'm going to say no, we need to work on that. So the education piece becomes, we need to look at this body part. Which again, the end result could be that you just don't have that therapist see that, but that's a choice too. Okay.
Real quick, when you go to the payers to get information, I'm always to know how many visits I see their patients. They already know how my competitors are seeing them. So you bring that information to them. Is there any discussion about the differences in the efficiency and effectiveness and things of that nature when you start to talk to them?
Absolutely.
They already know those things before you come in from a business standpoint, from a competitor standpoint.
So to repeat the question, when you go meet with the payer and share your data, they know your utilization rate. They know that you saw patient Smith for 9 visits, but they don't know your functional change that you created. Correct? I mean, is that what you're asking? Is
So I guess because in talking with them in the past, there are different tiers that you work on with them based on business utilization. So when you go to them with this information, what different slant are you putting on it to encourage them to incentivize you?
Again, to repeat the question is how are we getting the payer to incentivize us, or how are we getting away from just talking about visits? Is that right? You have to explain. You have to explain FOTO to them. I mean, you have to explain that it's a nationwide database. You can certainly hit them with 3 million episodes in the database and counting. Use that information. But then you need to show them that you're looking at effectiveness and efficiency, looking at utilization and amount of functional change you're creating per visit. And how has that helped us? Well, with this going to the pilot model, if we weren't on the pilot model, they'd cap us at 20 visits a year. And so they waived that with the pilot model. Now, you could argue that if I see a patient for 20 visits, I'm going to not get that 5%, because rarely does FOTO predict more than 20 visits. But where it has helped us tremendously is multiple episodes. So before you had shoulder surgery in January, then you had your knee worked on in September, you were out of visits. And now that's the payer has seen value in the fact that we're collecting data on functional change. And so that's helped. That's an example. All right. Thank you for your time.